November 2. 1943. Brunswick, Germany. Hauptmann Klaus Weber stood in the observation tower of the Waggum airfield, staring into the thick grey clouds that had blanketed northern Germany for 3 consecutive days. In his leather-bound journal, he wrote words that would haunt German air defence commanders for the remainder of the war. The clouds are our fortress now. 10/10 coverage. Ceiling at 800 metres. The Amis cannot see the ground. They cannot see our factories. They cannot bomb what they cannot see. For the first time in months, I sleep without fear of the morning raids. Through the impenetrable overcast that morning, Weber had witnessed something that shattered every assumption the Luftwaffe held about aerial warfare. American B-17 flying fortresses had appeared above the clouds, their engines thundering in perfect formation. Then, impossibly, they had dropped their bombs, not scattered across the countryside in blind desperation, but concentrated, accurate, devastating. The Waggum aircraft factory, hidden beneath what German commanders believed was impenetrable weather protection, had been destroyed with surgical precision. What Weber did not know, what no German air defence officer monitoring that grey November sky could have known, was that they were witnessing the combat debut of a technology so advanced, so revolutionary, that it would render Germany's greatest natural defence completely obsolete. The Americans had learned to see through clouds, and Germany's industrial heartland, which had hidden beneath winter weather for protection, now lay naked and vulnerable to round-the-clock bombardment. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The collapse of Germany's weather sanctuary had begun months earlier, though German intelligence failed to recognize the warning signs. Throughout the summer and early autumn of 1943, Luftwaffe pilots and flak commanders noted peculiar patterns in American bombing raids. On days of clear visibility, the 8th Air Force struck with predictable accuracy. But American raids continued even when clouds obscured all ground references, and some of these missions achieved unexplainable precision. Oberleutnant Ernst Kaufmann, a Bf-109 pilot with Jagdgeschwader 26, documented his first encounter with what he called ghost bombing in a letter to his wife, discovered decades later in family archives. We intercepted a formation of perhaps 40 American heavy bombers over Emden. The cloud cover was complete solid overcast from 600 metres to at least 5,000 metres. Visibility at ground level, perhaps 200 metres in fog. These conditions should have made accurate bombing impossible. The Americans should have turned back or scattered their bombs uselessly across empty farmland. Instead, they maintained perfect formation above the clouds. Then they bombed. Explosions even at our altitude. Later, reconnaissance revealed they had struck the submarine pens with remarkable accuracy. Several direct hits. How? They could not possibly have seen the target, yet they hit it anyway. German air defence doctrine, forged through bitter experience against British night bombing and American daylight raids, held certain truths to be absolute. Accurate bombing required visual identification of the target. Clouds, fog, and darkness provided protection. Factories could continue production during periods of poor weather. Cities could recover and rebuild while winter storms grounded the Allied bomber fleets. These assumptions had governed German civil defence planning, industrial dispersal strategies, and Luftwaffe tactical responses. The entire system of protecting Germany's war production depended on weather as a reliable shield against aerial attack. Major Wilhelm Schneider, Chief of Air Defence for the Ruhr Industrial Region, articulated this doctrine. In a classified report to the Reich Air Ministry in October 1943, our analysis of Allied bombing patterns confirms that weather remains our most reliable defence. During periods of cloud coverage exceeding 7/10, American bombing accuracy decreases by 85%. At 10/10 coverage, accurate bombing becomes effectively impossible. British night bombing, while destructive, remains area attacks lacking precision. American daylight bombing requires visual target acquisition. Therefore, Our production scheduling should maximize output during autumn and winter months when cloud coverage protects our facilities from precision attack. Schneider's report reflected conventional wisdom. It also reflected catastrophic ignorance of American technological development. Within weeks of his confident assessment, American bombers would demonstrate capabilities that rendered his entire strategic framework obsolete. The technology that would shatter German assumptions had been under development since 1941, born from British desperation and American innovation. The British, suffering devastating losses in early bombing campaigns, had pioneered radar-assisted navigation with the GEE and OBOE systems. These devices allowed bombers to determine their position and, with significant limitations, identify targets without visual reference. The Americans, characteristically, had taken the concept further. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the radiation laboratory had assembled some of the finest scientific minds in America. Their mission: develop a radar system compact enough to fit in a bomber, powerful enough to map ground features through clouds, and precise enough to guide accurate bombing without visual contact with the target. The result was the H2X radar, designated AN, APS 15 inches military nomenclature. To the aircrew who operated it, it was known simply as Mickey, a name that belied its revolutionary nature. The H2X system represented a quantum leap in bombing technology. Unlike earlier radar sets that could only detect large geographic features like coastlines, the H2X could distinguish individual buildings, rail yards, and industrial complexes through solid cloud cover. Its 3-centimeter wavelength provided resolution sharp enough to identify specific factory buildings within urban areas. Its range exceeded 30 kilometers, allowing bombardiers to locate and track targets well before reaching the release point. But the true innovation lay not in the hardware itself, but in how the Americans integrated it into their bombing system. The H2X operator, positioned in the bomber's nose compartment, would identify the target on his radar scope, a circular display showing ghostly green images of the terrain below. He would then guide the bombardier to the precise release point, factoring in wind speed, altitude, and bomb ballistics. The entire bomber formation would release on the lead aircraft's command, concentrating their bomb load on a target they never saw with human eyes. Lieutenant Robert Morrison, an H2X operator with the 482nd Bombardment Group, described the experience in his post-war memoir. Flying through solid overcast, you saw nothing outside but grey. Inside, hunched over the radar scope, you saw everything. Cities appeared as bright clusters of return signals. Rivers showed as dark, meandering lines. Rail yards created distinctive patterns of parallel lines. Specific factories, if you'd studied the radar imagery beforehand, had recognizable signatures. It was like having X-ray vision. We could see through the clouds that the Germans thought protected them. They had no idea we were watching them, tracking them, preparing to bomb them with precision they believed impossible. The 482nd Bombardment Group, nicknamed the Pathfinders, served as the spearhead of the H2X program. Activated in August 1943 at Alconbury, England, the group received the first production H2X sets in late September. Their mission: lead, bombing formations to targets obscured by weather, using radar to guide other bombers to accurate release points. The technology required extensive training. H2X operators needed to interpret radar imagery, distinguishing between similar-looking features and identifying specific targets from their radar signatures. Pilots needed to maintain precise formations, following the lead aircraft with absolute discipline. Bombardiers needed to trust instruments and calculations rather than visual confirmation of their targets. The 8th Air Force invested months in preparing for H2X operations. Operators trained on radar simulators, studying imagery of German cities and industrial targets. Practice missions over England refined procedures. By November 1943, the Americans were ready to unveil their secret weapon against German targets. The first major H2X-led mission came on November 3rd, 1943, one day after Hauptmann Weber's confident journal entry about clouds providing protection. The target was Wilhelmshaven, Germany's primary submarine construction facility. Cloud cover: 10/10 solid overcast from 2,000 to 20,000 feet. Visibility at ground level, less than 500 meters in rain and fog. Under previous conditions, such weather would have forced mission cancellation or resulted in scattered, ineffective bombing. Instead, 539 B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds, led by H2X-equipped Pathfinder aircraft, struck Wilhelmshaven with devastating accuracy. Post-strike reconnaissance, conducted when weather cleared days later, revealed concentrated bomb damage on the submarine yards, shipbuilding facilities, and naval installations. German defenders, accustomed to American raids aborting or scattering when weather closed in, were caught completely unprepared. Flak batteries, positioned to defend against visual bomb runs, fired blindly into clouds. Fighter interceptors, scrambled to defend the target, struggled to locate bomber formations hidden above the overcast. The few German fighters that did engage found themselves attacking disciplined formations that maintained perfect spacing and mutual defensive fire formations that somehow knew exactly where they were going despite flying completely blind by visual standards. Lieutenant Gustav Hauptmann, flying with Jagdgeschwader 11 during the Wilhelmshaven raid, radioed his ground controller with barely concealed bewilderment. "The Amis are bombing through solid clouds. I repeat, they are bombing through complete cloud coverage. Target appears to be shipyards. Bombing appears accurate. How is this possible? Request explanation." No explanation came. German intelligence had no answer. The raid seemed impossible by all conventional understanding of aerial warfare. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated with terrifying consistency. On November 5th, H2X-equipped bombers struck Gelsenkirchen's synthetic oil refineries through complete overcast. On November 13th, Bremen's port facilities were hit despite heavy cloud cover. On November 26th, the Messerschmitt factory at Augsburg was bombed through weather that should have provided absolute protection. Each raid followed the same pattern: American formations appearing above clouds, maintaining precise formations, releasing bombs with inexplicable accuracy, then departing before German defences could mount effective opposition. And each raid shattered a little more of Germany's confidence in weather as protection. Major Wilhelm Schneider, the air defense officer who had written so confidently about weather protection just weeks earlier, submitted a revised assessment to the Reich Air Ministry in late November. His tone had changed dramatically. "We face a new threat that our current defensive doctrine cannot address. American bombers demonstrate the capability to bomb accurately through complete cloud coverage. Multiple raids confirm this is not coincidence or luck. They possess some form of technology we believe radar-based that allows target identification and accurate bombing without visual reference. Our assumption that weather provides protection is no longer valid. We must fundamentally reconsider our defensive strategy and industrial protection measures." Schneider's report triggered alarm throughout the German High Command. If Americans could bomb accurately in any weather, Germany's entire strategy of maximizing production during winter months collapsed. Worse, the cloud cover that had protected German cities from the full weight of Allied bombing now offered no sanctuary. German technical intelligence officers, analyzing wreckage from shot-down American bombers, began finding components of the H2X system. The discoveries were both enlightening and disturbing. The Americans had developed compact, sophisticated radar equipment far beyond German expectations. The technology represented a level of miniaturization and precision that Germany's own radar programs had not achieved. Oberingenieur Franz Müller, a radar specialist with the Luftwaffe Technical Intelligence Service, examined H2X components recovered from a B-17 shot down near Bremen. His classified report, preserved in captured German documents, reveals German technical assessment. The American radar device uses 3 cm wavelength, providing resolution sufficient to map ground features with remarkable detail. The display system allows operators to distinguish individual buildings and infrastructure. Integration with bombing computers enables accurate targeting. Our own radar development has not achieved this level of miniaturization or resolution. The Americans have invested enormous resources in a specialized bombing radar that we did not anticipate and cannot quickly replicate. This technology gives them a significant advantage that we have no immediate counter for. The psychological impact on German defenders proved as devastating as the physical destruction. Luftwaffe fighter pilots, already outnumbered and increasingly outmatched by American escort fighters, now faced the knowledge that their enemies could strike at will regardless of weather. Flak crews, accustomed to defending visible targets, struggled with the futility of firing at bombers hidden above clouds. Civil defense officials, who had relied on weather forecasts to predict periods of reduced bombing, now faced the reality that no weather provided safety. Hauptmann Klaus Weber, the observation officer whose confident journal entry opened this account, wrote a very different assessment in late November. The Americans have stolen our fortress. The clouds that should protect us now mock our helplessness. They bomb with precision we cannot understand through weather that should make bombing impossible. Our fighters launch blindly. Our flak fires uselessly. Our factories burn despite the protective overcast. We watch the sky nervously even when solid clouds cover everything, knowing the enemies can see what we cannot see. This is a new kind of warfare, and we are losing. The winter of 1943 to 1944 would prove Weber's pessimism justified. As autumn storms gave way to the heavy overcast typical of northern European winters, the 8th Air Force intensified its H2X-led bombing campaign. The very weather conditions that should have grounded the bomber fleets instead became enablers of round-the-clock assault. Germany's industrial heartland, its cities, its infrastructure all lay exposed to attack in any weather, at any time. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The transformation of American bombing strategy in early 1944 revealed the full devastating potential of radar-guided attacks. While German commanders had initially viewed H2X missions as isolated incidents, the winter months brought a systematic campaign that exploited Germany's weather patterns with ruthless efficiency. Oberst Heinrich Volker, commander of Flak Regiment 234, defending the Ruhr industrial zone, maintained detailed operational logs throughout this period. His entries chart the growing desperation of German air defense, as traditional tactics proved increasingly irrelevant. January 14th, 1944. Solid overcast, ceiling 400 meters. In previous years, such conditions guaranteed safety for our factories. Production could continue without fear. Today, 280 American bombers struck the Thyssen steelworks at Hamborn. We fired 4,200 rounds of 88mm ammunition. We observed no results. The bombers remained above the clouds. We heard their engines, heard their bombs falling, saw the explosions and fires from the strikes. We could not see the aircraft themselves. Our predicted barrage fire, calculated based on estimated bomber positions, proved worthless. The Americans apparently navigate with precision through solid cloud coverage, making our calculations obsolete. We expended massive ammunition stocks for 0 confirmed kills. Meanwhile, Thyssen reports extensive damage to furnace buildings and the rolling mill. 23 workers dead, production halted for minimum 2 weeks. The Thyssen raid exemplified a pattern that would repeat across Germany throughout the winter. H2X-equipped Pathfinder aircraft would lead formations to targets hidden beneath clouds. The bombardiers would release on radar-identified aim points. The bombs would fall with accuracy that, while not matching clear-weather visual bombing, proved sufficient to cripple industrial facilities. And German defences, dependent on visual acquisition of targets, would fire blindly and ineffectively. The statistics from January and February 1944 told a stark story. The 8th Air Force flew 19 major bombing missions in conditions previously considered non-operational weather. These missions delivered 16,840 tons of bombs on German targets. German fighters, hampered by poor visibility and unable to locate bomber formations hidden in clouds, shot down. Only 97 bombers, a loss rate of 2.1%, well below the sustainable threshold. Flak accounted for minimal additional losses. Meanwhile, German industrial production suffered disruptions that had been considered impossible during winter months. General Major Josef Schmidt, deputy commander of the Luftwaffe's fighter forces in the West, confronted this new reality in a brutally frank report to Reichsmarschall Göring in February 1944. The American H2X radar bombing system has fundamentally altered the strategic balance. Our defensive doctrine assumed weather would limit Allied bombing operations approximately 60% of winter days. This assumption proved correct for visual bombing but completely wrong for radar bombing. The Americans now operate in any weather. They maintain formation discipline through clouds. They identify and strike targets without visual reference. Our fighter force, already strained by numerical inferiority and fuel shortages, cannot effectively intercept formations we cannot locate. Our pilots launch into solid overcast, search blindly for enemies they hear but cannot see, and return having accomplished nothing beyond fuel consumption. Meanwhile, American bombs fall on targets we believed protected by weather. We must develop new tactics and new technology to counter this threat, or we will lose the air defense battle. Schmidt's report acknowledged what frontline defenders had already learned through bitter experience. The Luftwaffe had no effective counter to H2X guided bombing. German attempts to jam the H2X radar with electronic countermeasures proved largely ineffective. The Americans quickly adapted frequencies and modified their equipment to maintain functionality. German development of similar radar bombing systems lagged years behind American capabilities, hampered by resource shortages, competing priorities, and the disruption caused by Allied bombing of German electronics facilities. The human cost of Germany's technological disadvantage manifested most visibly in the cities and industrial centres subjected to the new bombing campaign. Workers who had previously enjoyed relative safety during winter weather now faced constant threat. Civil defence officials struggled to maintain morale as the population realised that no weather provided protection anymore. Margarete Klein, a nurse at the Städtisches Krankenhaus in Cologne, kept a diary throughout the war. Her entries from February 1944 capture the psychological toll of radar bombing. February 22nd. Another raid today. The sirens wailed at 11. 15 inches the morning. Heavy clouds, rain, wind. We hoped they would turn back. They never turn back anymore. We heard them above the clouds, that distinctive thunder of hundreds of engines, then the whistling of falling bombs. The explosions. The hospital shook. Windows shattered in the surgical ward. 3 patients injured by flying glass. The Geryon district is burning again. We received 47 casualties by evening. Burns mostly. 2 dead on arrival. The survivors ask us, why can they bomb through clouds? How do they know where to aim? We have no answers. We only know that nowhere is safe anymore. The clouds that used to comfort us now only hide our killers. Klein's questions reflected widespread confusion among the German population. The mechanics of radar bombing remained mysterious to civilians and most military personnel. Rumors proliferated. The Americans had developed magical seeing devices. They had recruited psychics who could visualize targets from the air. They had spies on the ground using radio beacons to guide the bombers. The truth-sophisticated microwave radar, integrated with advanced computing systems, lay beyond most people's comprehension, so they filled the knowledge gap with speculation and fear. The operational expansion of H2X capabilities through the spring of 1944 brought new dimensions of threat. Initial missions had targeted large, easily identifiable radar signatures, major cities, industrial complexes, rail yards. As operators gained experience and techniques improved, Americans began striking smaller, more difficult targets. On March 4, 1944, H2X-equipped bombers attacked ball-bearing factories in Erkner, a suburb of Berlin. The facilities, deliberately dispersed among residential areas to complicate targeting, were small installations that presented minimal radar signatures. Yet, American bombardiers identified and struck them with sufficient accuracy to cause serious production disruptions. Herr Director Albert Speer, Reich Minister for Armaments and War Production, visited the Erkner facilities on March 7th to assess damage. His subsequent memo to Hitler revealed the strategic implications. The American attack on Erkner demonstrates alarming refinement in their radar bombing capabilities. These facilities were specifically chosen for their small size and urban camouflage. We believed they would be effectively invisible to aerial observation, especially through cloud cover. The Americans found them anyway. They bombed with enough precision to damage 3 of 4 factories, while causing relatively limited collateral damage to surrounding residential areas. This suggests their radar can distinguish individual buildings, not merely large industrial complexes. If they can target dispersed facilities of this size, our entire strategy of industrial dispersal provides no protection. We must consider that any installation, regardless of size or concealment, can be located and attacked in any weather. Speer's recognition of the strategic problem came too late for effective countermeasures. Germany's industrial base, already strained by years of war and previous bombing campaigns, lacked the resources for further dispersal or underground relocation of critical facilities. The Luftwaffe fighter force, hemorrhaging pilots and aircraft in desperate battles against American escort fighters, could not provide effective defense. The flak artillery, consuming ammunition at unsustainable rates while scoring minimal kills against high-altitude radar bombers, offered no solution. Germany found itself in a technological trap. American H2X radar represented the culmination of massive investment in research, development, and production. The system required rare materials, sophisticated manufacturing, and extensive training programs. Germany, blockaded and resource-starved, could not replicate these investments. Even if German scientists developed equivalent technology, German industry lacked the capacity to produce it in meaningful quantities while simultaneously meeting demands for fighters, flak guns, tanks, and all the other weapons required for a multi-front war. Oberingenieur Franz Müller, the radar specialist who had examined captured H2X components, authored a classified assessment in April 1944 that outlined Germany's predicament. American H2X radar technology relies on components we cannot mass produce: miniaturized vacuum tubes, precision machining of waveguides, specialized crystals for frequency control, and compact high-voltage power supplies. Our electronics industry could potentially manufacture these components, but not in the quantities required while maintaining production of conventional radars for flak fire control, aircraft intercept, and naval applications. Furthermore, the Americans integrate their bombing radar with advanced computing devices that automatically calculate ballistics. We have no equivalent computing technology in production. Even if we captured intact H2X systems and reverse-engineered them perfectly, we would require minimum 18 months to begin production, and possibly 36 months to achieve meaningful deployment numbers. By that time, the strategic situation will have been decided. We are not merely behind in one technology, but in an entire technological ecosystem that supports American radar bombing. The spring offensive against German oil production demonstrated how Americans exploited their technological advantage with strategic precision. Germany's synthetic fuel industry, crucial for sustaining military operations, had previously enjoyed some protection through deliberate siting in locations, often obscured by industrial haze and weather. H2X radar negated these advantages. Between May and July 1944, the 8th Air Force conducted 18 major raids on German oil facilities. 11 of these missions employed H2X guidance due to poor visibility at the targets. The cumulative effect proved catastrophic. German aviation fuel production dropped from 175,000 tons in April to 52,000 tons in July, a 70% reduction that crippled Luftwaffe operations. Major Dietrich von Müller, operations officer for Jagdgeschwader 3, documented the fuel crisis and its connection to radar bombing in his unit war diary. June 28, 1944. Our allocation, 30 minutes flight time per pilot per day, barely sufficient for one intercept mission with no reserve for extended combat or bad weather diversions. Training for replacement pilots reduced to minimum. Many arrive at operational squadrons with less than 40 hours total flight time. Experienced pilots conserve fuel by avoiding unnecessary combat unless targets are absolutely priority. Meanwhile, American bombers appear overhead daily regardless of weather, striking our fuel facilities with precision we cannot prevent. The connection is obvious and fatal. They destroy our fuel production using radar that allows all-weather operations. We cannot stop them because we lack fuel to fly adequate intercept missions. Each successful raid reduces our fuel availability, which reduces our ability to defend against subsequent raids. This is a death spiral we cannot escape. The Normandy invasion in June 1944 added another dimension to Germany's radar bombing crisis. As Allied forces established lodgements in France, the 8th Air Force shifted some resources to tactical support missions, but H2X equipped bombers continued their strategic campaign against German industry, now with even shorter flight times from bases in liberated France. Worse, the Americans began using H2X for tactical purposes beyond strategic bombing. Battlefield interdiction missions employed radar guidance to strike German troop concentrations, supply depots, and communications centers obscured by weather. German armies, accustomed to using bad weather for concealment during movements and reorganizations, discovered they remained vulnerable to precision air attack regardless of visibility. Generaloberst Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, noted this tactical revolution in his August 1944 situation report. Enemy demonstrates capability to locate and attack our armored formations through complete cloud coverage. On August 9th, Panzer Lehr Division attempted daylight movement from Alençon to Argentan under heavy overcast. We believed poor visibility would provide concealment from enemy air attack. American heavy bombers, navigating somehow through solid clouds, struck our columns with considerable accuracy. Division lost 31 tanks, 70 other vehicles, and suffered 340 casualties. Similar incidents reported by other formations. We can no longer rely on weather for concealment during tactical movements. The Americans see through clouds with their radar devices, converting our armored forces into targets regardless of visibility conditions. This further constrains our already limited operational mobility. The psychological impact on German military personnel deepened through the summer of 1944. Soldiers and civilians alike understood that technology they could not comprehend and could not counter was systematically dismantling Germany's capacity to continue the war. The invisible threat from above, present in any weather, striking with seemingly supernatural precision, generated anxiety that eroded morale more effectively than visible dangers. Feldwebel Thomas Richter, a flak gunner whose battery defended industrial targets in the Saar region, expressed this psychological burden in letters to his family. July 19th, we heard them again today. Always we hear them but never see them. The clouds hide them but do not protect us. They drop their bombs blindly, we think, but the bombs fall on our factories with precision that cannot be blind. Magic? Technology beyond our understanding? Does it matter? We stand at our guns, staring up into grey clouds, listening to engines we cannot locate, waiting for bombs we cannot predict. Then the explosions, then the fires, then we count our dead and wait for the next raid. This is not war as we trained for. This is something new, something against which our courage and skill mean nothing. By autumn 1944, the cumulative effect of H2X guided bombing had become statistically undeniable. German industrial production declined across all categories. Transportation networks, subjected to systematic interdiction regardless of weather, fragmented into isolated segments. Oil production remained suppressed despite desperate German efforts at dispersal and concealment. The Luftwaffe fighter force, starved for fuel, and losing pilots faster than training could replace them, largely ceased effective operations, except for sporadic, desperate attacks. The statistics preserved in strategic bombing survey documents tell the story with cold precision. Between November 1943 and May 1945, H2X equipped bombers flew approximately 4,200 missions against targets in Germany and occupied Europe. These missions delivered 284,000 tons of bombs, with an average accuracy that, while inferior to clear-weather visual bombing, proved sufficient to cripple targeted industries. German fighters shot down only 3.1% of attacking bombers on H2X missions versus 5.8% on clear-weather visual missions, a reflection of reduced intercept effectiveness when formations remained hidden in clouds. The combination of sustained operations regardless of weather and reduced loss rates gave Americans overwhelming advantage in attrition warfare. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, commander of Germany's fighter forces, later reflected on the strategic impact of American radar bombing in his post-war memoir. The H2X radar system did not win the air war by itself. American numerical superiority, long-range escort fighters, and Germany's resource exhaustion all contributed to our defeat. But H2X eliminated our last strategic sanctuary. Weather had been our ally, forcing periodic respites in Allied bombing that allowed recovery and reconstruction. H2X eliminated these respites. The bombers came in any weather. Our factories burned in rain and snow and fog just as they burned under clear skies. We could not rebuild, could not recover, could not regroup. The constant pressure, enabled by radar bombing, broke our industrial capacity and our will to continue. Technology we could not match and could not counter had defeated us as surely as enemy of armies crossing our borders. The final months of the war saw H2X employment expand beyond strategic bombing to include direct tactical support. As Allied armies advanced into Germany in early 1945, radar-equipped bombers struck targets ahead of ground forces, attacked German reserves, attempting to organize counterattacks, and interdicted retreat routes, all regardless of weather conditions that had previously grounded air operations. Hauptmann Klaus Weber, the observation officer, whose confident journal entry about cloud protection opened this account, survived the war and American captivity. In 1949, he published a memoir of his service that included reflection on his November 1943 miscalculation. I wrote that clouds were our fortress. I believed weather would protect us. I was wrong. The Americans possessed technology that turned our fortress into an illusion. They could see what we could not see. They could bomb what we thought hidden. They operated when we thought operation impossible. My error was not simply tactical but conceptual. I failed to understand that American industrial capacity and scientific expertise had created capabilities beyond my imagination. Many of us failed to understand this. We measured American capabilities by German standards and assumed our limitations applied to our enemies. This assumption cost us the war. The H2X radar, more than any single weapon system, taught us that we faced an enemy who had surpassed us not just in numbers, but in technological sophistication we could not match. The story of German reactions to American H2X radar bombing ultimately reveals how technological superiority, properly employed, can neutralize traditional military advantages. German soldiers possessed courage, tactical skill, and defensive positions strengthened by years of preparation. None of these advantages mattered when American bombers could strike accurately through weather that German defenders had counted on for protection. The psychological transformation of German personnel from confidence in weather as sanctuary to recognition that no sanctuary existed paralleled Germany's broader confrontation with American material and technological superiority. Individual German excellence in tactics and courage could not overcome systematic American advantages in resources, organization, and innovation. For the men who operated German air defenses, the experience left permanent impressions. They had witnessed their assumptions shattered, their expertise rendered obsolete, and their desperate efforts proven futile against enemies who possessed capabilities they could not understand, could not counter, and could not escape. The clouds that should have protected them became merely witnesses to their defeat, grey shrouds that concealed nothing from enemies who had learned to see through them, with electronic eyes that never blinked and never missed their targets. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.